Alrighty. Now, my name's Michelle Gardner. I'm an Aboriginal woman who comes from the Warren River in Western Victoria. I'm a Gunditjmara girl. I've lived in Mongarlowe for about 25 years and I feel very connected to this country. I've got a daughter, Jalamara, who is of Walbunga Yuin ancestry, and I'm very pleased to have been asked to acknowledge country today for the official opening of the Mongarlowe Hall. To begin, I'd like to share with you a little of what I know about the Aboriginal history of this place. Mongarlowe falls within the traditional lands of the Walbunga people who are part of the Yuin nation. The Walbunga people knew this place as Monga. It wasn't until 1891 that the area was renamed Mongarlowe. In Mongarlowe and the broader Braidwood regions, as in the rest of Australia, colonisation was brutal for Aboriginal people. Our families were decimated by frontier violence and disease. Local Monga Aboriginal families were not spared these horrors. In the late 1800s, there were 2 Aboriginal reserves gazetted here in Mongarlowe. Aboriginal reserves were parcels of land that were set aside for the sole use of Aboriginal people to cultivate. They were granted by the Lands Commissioner to serve a number of purposes. They were sometimes described as a refuge or a place offering protection from the impact of colonisation. They were also granted in response to complaints by colonial settlers who objected to Aboriginal people living in towns or in fringe camps. Out of sight, out of mind. In Mongarlowe, 2 Aboriginal women applied to the Lands Commissioner seeking to secure some of their land at a time when their land was being carved up and handed out to settlers. In 1879, an Aboriginal woman known as Mary Ann Willoughby initiated a request for land, and 148 acres was granted for Aboriginal people. A second reserve of just under 9 acres was established following a request by another Aboriginal woman, Margaret Bryant, in 1885. Both of these reserves were revoked in 1893 and ownership of the land was returned to the Crown. Mary Ann Willoughby and her children stayed living in and around Mongarlowe until 1902. Beyond this, most of the surviving Aboriginal families from the area eventually drifted off towards the coast for safe haven. Recognising this history, the history of this place, and the truth of our past does not diminish us. It deepens our shared history. This is a colonised country, and no country that has experienced colonisation can escape its darker legacies. An honest, inclusive history provides a richer, more inclusive identity. We have to understand our history to make sense of our future. It has always surprised me the number of times I've been asked by people around Braidwood and Mongarlowe, oh well, there are no Aboriginal people here. Well, we are here. Our history is in every tree, every river. We're the world's oldest living culture. The legacy of knowledge, resilience and innovation in Aboriginal people is a source of pride. You don't get to be considered the world's oldest living culture, continuous culture by luck. For tens of thousands of years, we've lived on this continent sustainably and adjusting to climate change. Our culture has survived everything that colonialism has thrown at us over the last couple of centuries. Surely there is strength and resilience in that, which should inspire us to help find solutions to the challenges we are collectively facing today as a result of the current climate catastrophe. In my view, we need to draw on First Nations knowledge systems now more than ever. First Nations knowledge systems value consensus, responsibility to community and deep care for country. They are not simply cultural artefacts that are sophisticated, they are sophisticated intellectual traditions. They offer ways of thinking rooted in sustainability, reciprocity, interdependence and caring for country. Interdependence asks us to see our connections to each other, to the natural world and to the generations that will follow.
not as vulnerabilities but as sources of strength. Interdependence shifts our focus from individuals to communities, from short-term self-interest to shared responsibility and mutual benefit. It means sharing resources and technology, acting collectively. Recognising our resilience is measured by how well we protect the most vulnerable. Interdependence is a survival strategy. Listening is as important as speaking. Compromise is not weakness but wisdom. The well-being of each of us is bound to the well-being of all of us. First Nations people have a deep understanding of how to manage and maintain land and waters, including practices like cultural fire management and cultural flows in waterways. Our knowledge is crucial for climate change adaptation and mitigation, offering long-standing practices, sustainable living and understanding of ecosystems. The Mongarlowe Hall was conceived by our Mongarlowe community in response to the terrible bushfires in 2019 and 20. It was necessary because of the ongoing impacts of climate change in our communities and our lives. I want to acknowledge and thank Carol and the committee for the work on behalf of all of us here at Mongarlowe. In my view, it can draw parallels between the development of the Mongarlowe Hall and the adoption of First Nations knowledge systems. The committee placed community above the individual. It demonstrated independence, interdependence and resilience. It listened. I'm very proud to live in a community that understands and values these things. I'd like to acknowledge that Mongarlowe Hall is on the Aboriginal land of the Walbunga in the Yuin Nation, sovereign land that was never ceded. Let's pay our respect to Walbunga country in the way we operate in Mongarlowe. I pay my respect to the Aboriginal people who have performed the smoking ceremony for us today, a ritual performed here for 65,000 years to acknowledge country. I pay my respect to the elders, I pay my respect to the Aboriginal people here today. It always was and it always will be Aboriginal land. Ngā mihi.